Ace Combat 5 is easily one of the best flight simulators I've ever played in my life. I think what separates this from the rest of the games in the series, and moreover other flight simulators in general, is that this game actually proved that a flight simulator doesn't have to be just about flying planes. There's actually an in-depth story that branches out with character development, twists and turns you wouldn't expect, conspiracy, and things like that, and it's really good. This is one of the rare times I actually care about the people in my squadron, where I actually give two shits about these people that I fly with. Most other flight sims have names and people that are in your squad, but there's no depth to them, there's no character, you don't get attached to them at all. They don't tell the story, they just say, these are your squad mates, you fly with them, you shoot stuff. And it doesn't go beyond that. That's not to say other flight sims aren't good. I've played games like the Hawk series, those are good games, but the stories never really branched out to the point I actually gave a shit about any of the characters that were involved. Ace Combat 5 is different in that I actually do care about the people I'm flying with. They actually took the time to develop these characters and make them distinct from one another. The game also has a really nice supporting cast. It's not just your squadron you're dealing with. There's a lot of other characters involved that are all interesting, some good, some bad. The gameplay is about what you've come to expect if you've played any other Ace Combat games. It's always been a bizarre mixture of realism with arcade style, and I'm going to try to explain that. I've played a lot of flight sims in my time, and I've played some that are very hyper-realistic, where your pilot can black out if you turn too tightly and things like that. Where I've played other flight sims that seem to have absolutely no fabric of how aerodynamics work at all in any way. Ace Combat always had a nice balance. It wasn't too strict to alienate gamers that just want to play a game, but it was strict enough with how planes actually work that people who preferred realism over arcade can still have fun with them. I'm not saying the other Ace Combat games didn't have a story or didn't have the same gameplay elements. Ace Combat 6 is very good too, but nothing has ever trumped Ace Combat 5's story to me. They actually took some time and actually fleshed this thing out, whereas the other games kind of fell flat. Plus, this is the only one I've played so far that actually makes you attached to members of your squadron, as opposed to other supporting characters at different parts of the war. I don't want to spoil too much about the plot in that regard. It's just too good for me to really say much about. I don't want to spoil anything. I will highlight some moments in the game for you to give you some idea what I'm talking about. One thing I've always loved about Ace Combat is that they're not afraid to do something ridiculous. By that I mean Ace Combat is one of the few games nowadays, especially in terms of flight sims, that actually has really powerful, really big bosses to fight. They're not bosses by default, but they're large super weapons, and there's usually multiple ones throughout the course of any Ace Combat game. I think one of the most memorable fights in Ace Combat 5 is where you fight against the Rimfaxi. It's the sister ship of a submarine you killed before. The only difference this time is where before you had allied support, now you're going in with just you and the rest of your squad mates to take out this one super weapon. The music's getting you pumped up, and the whole time you're hearing nothing but radio signals. You hear your allies bitching at you to hurry up before they destroy our forces. You hear the enemy getting cocky until towards the end when they start freaking out that you're actually beating them. It's a really hectic boss fight, especially towards the end where the Rimfaxi starts shooting its trademark weapon at you, the burst missile, because it's getting that desperate. It's probably one of the best moments of the game. There's another mission that was very memorable too. It starts off really simply. You're supposed to do a flyover of a speech that the vice president of your country is giving to the citizens. It sounds really simple, but then all of a sudden there's a huge air raid. Suddenly hundreds of enemy fighter jets are trying to destroy this one stadium, and it's only you and your squadron to fend them off for the time being.
This is Thunderhead. Approaching enemy formation confirmed. War Dog, engage them. Stadium in sight. Secure the airspace until the Goverzon squadron arrives. Johnny home. Enemy fighters.
The allies here.
McNeely Air Force Base tried to scramble fighters, but the runway was blocked after someone crashed on takeoff. I'm calling for reinforcements now. It'll be 6 minutes before the nearest squadron arrives.
Command tells you that you have 6 minutes before allies will show up, but then right before 6 minutes are up, this shit happens!
Attention all units approaching November City. I guess they had us going too. What? Who is this? That was a pretty good drill they got going. Anyway, drill's over. Return to base. Wait! What are you talking about? ACCM! Restore communication link! The Allied planes aren't coming! What's going on? Reinforcements are on the way. Just hang in there. Damn it! None of the bases are responding to me! What don't you understand? There's an air battle above the stadium!
It's probably one of the most adrenaline-fueled times I've ever had in the game. You aren't really sure what's happening, and all you could do is continually fight back while you wait for Command to actually get their heads out of their asses to actually send you some support. How this mission ends is too good to spoil. You just have to play the game. Overall, I think Ace Combat 5 is the best one in the entire series. That's not to say the other ones aren't good, they're just not as good. It gives a variety of depth to the characters you're working with, and it has a really good flight sim on top of it. So, with that, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.